Good morning, Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin is down 3.24% in the last 24 hours, with a last of 46,866, a high of 48,441, and a low of 45,038. That's $1 for 2,133 Satoshis. Volume was at 8,736 Satoshis. The market continues to lean long, with 93% of the market heading that direction. Bitcoin dominance was at 80%. Blockstream Markets Weekly, February 26, 2021. Coinbase and CoinShares look to IPO at big valuations. Canadian ETFs force Gbtc to a discount. Square and MicroStrategy buy more Bitcoin. Tether removes NYAG overhang. And JPM says investors should put 1% in Bitcoin. By Jesse Knutson. Blockstream Markets Weekly. What's happening in the markets? Blame the bonds. Bitcoin is on pace to finish on the bottom end of the week's range, down about 15% and on track for the largest drop in dollar terms on record. An aggressive sell-off in global bonds looked to be the primary culprit for the declines in both Bitcoin and global equities. Declines in bonds saw yields surge, with the U.S. 10-year yield trading as high as 1.6%, the highest since June of last year, after a poorly received government auction was followed by selling from holders of mortgage securities. Declines this week brought an end to Bitcoin's 4-week win streak. February, though, is still on pace for a 37% month-over-month gain. IPOs, ETFs, and more corporate adoption. News flow this week remained constructive. IPOs were one of the key themes of the week after Coinbase filed for a direct listing. Recent trading on NASDAQ private markets reportedly puts a Coinbase valuation at $100 billion. That would make Coinbase one of the largest financial service providers in the world. For perspective, the current market cap of the CME Group is $73 billion, and Goldman Sachs is $113 billion. Asset manager CoinShares is also preparing to IPO with a potential $3 to $5 billion evaluation. The listing would make CoinShares the first major digital asset investment firm to list publicly. Strong debuts from 2 Canadian Bitcoin ETFs last week look to be shaking up the Bitcoin fund industry and pushing Gbtc to its first discount to NAV since March 2017, as investors rotated into the cheaper, more accurate Bitcoin trackers north of the border. Finally, corporate adoption news continued, with MicroStrategy planning to buy more Bitcoin even after last week's $1 billion purchase, and Square following up on its original $50 million Bitcoin purchase with an additional $170 million acquisition. The taxman cometh. Looking back at Bitcoin's seasonality, March is typically the worst month of the year. Over the past 5 years, Bitcoin has finished March lower 80% of the time, with a median decline of 9.2% and an average decline of 13.1%. The filing deadline for U.S. federal income tax returns for individuals is April 15th. Historically, we've seen a dump in the weeks ahead of this as retail investors sell Bitcoin to raise money for taxes. The historical pattern is for a strong bounce after that selling has been digested. Given the much higher degree of institutional participation this year, I expect to see a lighter than seasonal March sell-off as institutional investors backstop retail selling. Risk asset or inflation hedge? This week's big move in the government bond market points to how investors are looking for both growth and inflation to move higher on the other side of the pandemic. Most recent mainstream institutional and corporate Bitcoin converts have been looking at Bitcoin as an inflation hedge, but it has shown a pretty high correlation with equities for most of the past 2 quarters. The narrative has been inflation hedge, but the trading has looked a lot more like a risk asset. The dollar is also strengthening a bit, which is challenging for Bitcoin. It will be interesting to see if Bitcoin can decouple from equities. Where now? With Bitcoin falling below the 20-day moving average and last week's expected support level of $48,000, I think the next level of support is probably the early February high of $42,000. With monthly Bitcoin options expiry wrapping up just a few hours ago, we've probably exhausted some of the selling from traders trying to push the price favorable to their positioning. Price bouncing now since the 7:30 to 8 a.m. UTC expiry bottom. Over the past few months, we've seen a bit of a price rally in the days immediately following the expiry. Given the big new move in price over the previous few weeks, a load of macro concerns, normal seasonality, and the price running a bit ahead of the stock to flow implied fair value price, it seems like a natural place in the cycle to expect a bit of consolidation. This is healthy and will allow fundamentals to catch up to recent price action. Bitcoin market news. MicroStrategy will buy more Bitcoin after its $1 billion purchase. MicroStrategy paid an average of 52,750 for nearly 20,000 Bitcoin last week after issuing 1.05 in convertible billion dollars in convertible bonds. Their total holdings now top 90,000 Bitcoin at a total cost of $2.17 billion. The company said it will continue buying Bitcoin using excess cash and may issue more debt to finance the purchases. Coinbase files for IPO $100 billion valuation. Coinbase filed with the SEC to go public via direct listing yesterday, a strategy used by both Slack and Spotify to sell shares directly to the public without an intermediary. The company will list its shares on the NASDAQ under the stock ticker COIN. Coinbase hasn't yet provided an official date for its IPO. Shares sold by a NASDAQ private markets were most recently valued at $373, giving Coinbase a valuation of about $100 billion. To put that into perspective, the current market cap of the CME Group is $73 billion, and Goldman Sachs is $113 billion. At $100 billion, Coinbase will be one of the largest financial service providers in the world. It will be cashed up and able to acquire licenses, businesses, and headcount as it sees fit. Tether's NYAG settlement is positive for the industry. As part of the settlement, Tether and Bitfinex agreed to pay an $18.5 million fine, publish quarterly reports on their financial holdings, and block any New York residents or entities from using their services, something they've been doing for years. Pat LaVecchia, CEO and co-chairman of Oasis Pro Markets, summed it up: long and short, great result for them. Very workable fine, and they can continue their business. JPM put 1% in Bitcoin. It's funny to see major financial service providers making the same pitches Bitcoiners made years earlier. It is annoying, though, how they use cryptocurrency and Bitcoin interchangeably. In a multi-asset portfolio, investors can likely add up to 1% of their allocation to cryptocurrencies in order to achieve any efficiency gain in the overall risk-adjusted returns. of the portfolio. Square doubles down, buys $170 million more Bitcoin, follows a $50 million purchase worth of Bitcoin from October last year. The total now brings Square's Bitcoin holdings to 5% of cash and cash equivalents. Square's CFO said, Bitcoin has the potential to be the native currency of the internet, and we want to continue to participate and learn in a disciplined way. Bloomberg ETF analyst, pioneering Bitcoin ETF, a raging success. On Monday alone, investors traded $260 million of the Purpose Bitcoin ETF, BTCC, which was launched Thursday. For just the first 2 days, its trading volume approached $421 million. Bloomberg ETF analyst Eric Balkunas said that the Purpose Bitcoin ETF's performance surpassed analysts' estimates, adding that if it were to keep up at this pace, it will be the biggest ETF in Canada in 20 days. CoinShares to IPO for $3 to $5 billion. CoinShares is on track to become the first major digital asset investment firm to list publicly. The firm is based in London and intends to list on Nasdaq First North Growth Market in Sweden with a target trading date of March 11th. Anchorage raises $80 million after receiving banking charter. Anchorage is a Bitcoin custodian. The company also wants to become a crypto banking as a service startup, meaning it could become a crypto partner for both challenger banks and traditional banks. The Series C funding round was led by GIC, Singapore's sovereign wealth fund. One of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds taking the leading round in a digital asset custodian is very interesting. Commission compression at Bitcoin ETFs is fast and furious. North America's second Bitcoin ETF, EBIT, cut its fees from 1% to 0.75. BTCC launched just a day before EBIT, but the momentum it's garnered really points to the importance of a first mover advantage. BTCC has outpaced EBIT with $448 million in assets compared to just $28 million for EBIT. The median fee for passive ETFs is just 0.49%. At this rate, Bitcoin-focused ETFs might get there sometime next week. Gbtc tanks, outpacing Bitcoin correction. I think the article is completely missing what's going on here. This isn't reflective of declining demand for Bitcoin. I think it's being driven by the ETF launches in Canada and the growing probability of a similar product in the US. Retail traders are going to rotate to ETF products that are cheaper and track NAV better. That will kill the premium. Once the premium is gone, there's no arbitrage trade for the hedge funds. Leveraged positions or those with borrow costs might be forced sellers. The GBTC could be in for a bumpy ride. ARK's Cathie Wood. Bitcoin hedges against confiscation of wealth. Says that can happen in two ways. One, with inflation, and two, with direct confiscation, as happened last year in Saudi Arabia when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman facilitated the confiscation of an estimated $800 billion of wealth from ultra-high net worth businessmen and members of the royal family. We see so many use cases of Bitcoin, but probably the most important use case is as an insurance policy around the world against the confiscation of wealth. CME Bitcoin futures see strong growth in volume. Users. January ADV hit 87,700 Bitcoin. Each CME Bitcoin futures contract is worth the value of 5 Bitcoin paid out in dollars, plus 57% month over month, plus 63% year over year. 2021 has seen the addition of 733 new users, 2.3 times all of 2020. Fed to Congress, looking carefully at digital dollar issuance. Chairman Powell called the potential digital dollar a high priority project, according to the testimony. I don't think this will be positive for individual freedom or privacy. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Bitcoin is inefficient and speculative. Her comments were followed later in the week by an operational error at FedWire, the central bank's real-time wire transfer service that is used to send large sums of cash between banks, that crashed the Fed's payment system. Yellen has also worried about the ability of Bitcoin to be used for money laundering and other forms of illegal activities, despite reports that indicate only 0.34% of cryptocurrency transactions are linked to illicit activities. Charts. CME Bitcoin futures accounts hit new high, points to strong institutional interest. Commodities and equities implies a rotation out of risk assets. Gbtc premiums flip to discount. As mentioned above, I think this reflects the success of 2 Canadian ETFs listed last week and the increased probability of a US ETF in coming months than a reflection of Bitcoin investment appetite. 2020 debt, GDP growth. Global debt up by $24 trillion in 2020 to $281 trillion, or 355% of global GDP. This is just fine. Seasonality. March is the lowest month of the year. March has been down month over month 4 of the past 5 years. The median decline is 9.2%. The average decline is 13.1%. Bitcoin has tended to bounce recently after options expiry. Option traders typically push the price in the direction they want it to settle. Recently, that has been down. Once that selling is exhausted, price has tended to bounce 15 to 20% in days following the expiry. Canadian ETF already holds more than 10,000 Bitcoin. The Purpose Bitcoin ETF, BTCC, already has more than 10,000 Bitcoin assets under management. Total AUM already closing in on $600 million. Treasury yields pass 1.6%, the highest since June of last year, seen as a potential warning sign for risk assets. Yields globally now look to be back to pre-pandemic levels. Thank you for listening to the most concise roundup of Bitcoin market action in the industry. Subscribe to Blockstream Markets Weekly on Medium, or subscribe to Blockstream Markets Weekly as read by Thomas Hunt on the World Crypto Network. And don't forget to leave some applause for Blockstream Markets Weekly. I haven't logged in, but I should. Check out shop.worldcryptonetwork.com, where you can get our HAL Finny t-shirt or a mug. And we've got the brand new Trezors Don't Float t-shirt version 2.0. He's about to have a boating accident. Watch out, Trezor. It doesn't look safe because you don't float. Or check out our new laptop fundraiser where 102 contributors are helping us all the way to a new laptop. We are 94% of the way there. You can donate now with the Bitcoin QR code on your screen or with the Lightning Network at Tallycoin. Link in the description below. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe down below. If the World Crypto Network gets 100,000 subscribers, the price of Bitcoin must follow. The price of Bitcoin is down 2.22% in the last 24 hours, with a last of 47,000 even, a high of 48,407 and a low of 45,038. That's $1 for 2,128 Satoshis. Volume was at 8,254 Bitcoins changing hands. The market continues to lean long, but slightly less, at 93%. Bitcoin dominance was at 80%. Until next time, bye bye.